All right, there we go. Uh, Hello, friends, and thank you for joining this evening's webinar. My name is Davey Gerhardt, and I am the Executive Director of TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. And we are being hosted by the Central Gulf Coast Diocese. We are here to talk a little bit about getting ready for our campaigns, what to expect for fundraising in 2026. It's a little bit of a different landscape. You may have noticed some things are different in this economy and this year, and we want to make sure everyone's well prepared for it. Thank you so much for being here tonight and for participating with us. We're really excited to have you here. What we're going to be talking about, well, we're asking some familiar questions in what is a new landscape. And I want us to be prepared this year as we go into our fundraising season on how we talk about money faithfully. There's a lot that we will be covering. The anxiety in our congregations is pretty high. So, how do we make certain that we are inclusive without spreading that anxiety around? We want to talk about how we adapt our campaigns and how we become generous and responsive to what's happening in our economy and in our congregations and with the mission that we are called to support uh, and make certain that we can do that. So, we're going to talk about adaptive campaigns. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about formation because the more we talk about and understand the role of generosity in our discipleship, the more we understand how we are on a journey, the more we understand how formation and stewardship tie into our gospel, tie into the mission, the less of a surprise it will be when we go to talk to our members about how they share their gifts of time, talent, and treasure. We're going to do all that tonight and still have time for your questions. The main thing I want us to understand is that in this world of anxiety, which we should name, there's a lot going on in the news cycle, there's a lot that's going on in our economy. The message we want out there is don't panic, but do adopt pastoral practices even more than we normally do and think of in for our campaigns this year, and make certain that we are creating the kinds of campaigns that reach people and elevate them, bring them up. A changing fundraising landscape does not require frantic urgency. It instead requires more clarity, more intention, more invitation, more relation. A good friend of mine who is a hostage negotiator for the FBI says that nothing is a panic if you have a plan. If you have a plan for how to do something, you can get through it. And not that I'm in any way suggesting that stewardship and hostage negotiating are similar, but our response to things that we don't understand or that feel out of our control can start to feel like panic if we don't put a plan around them. That's why it's May and we're getting started thinking about this now. Here's what absolutely has not changed in our fundraising landscape. People are still sharing their gifts with the church. They're still following the gospel call. They are still being inspired by the work that we do. And they still make beautiful gifts when they trust the mission, when they understand that the church is doing what it says it's doing, what it's called to do. Matthew 25, getting out there and seeking and serving, feeding, visiting, loving, healing our neighbor. That is the work that they trust us to do. When they understand the need, which is our responsibility as church leaders to make sure that folks are understanding what is happening, understanding their role and how they can contribute to the kingdom of God and how they can work. When people feel personally invited into the work, this is important too, right? If we just put out a blanket invitation and we hope everyone responds, they might not feel personally called. This year, we're going to pay attention to how we can make certain that everyone feels that personal connection, that call to be included. When people believe that their gift matters, when people believe that their gift is being counted, when their money is going to mission, when their money is attached to meaning, people are inspired to give. So let's make certain that when we communicate and talk and create a program in church, it's all about that mission. It's getting people to understand that. And when they experience giving as meaningful, they're getting something out of it, not just giving. And that could be the joy that they feel. We hope that we feel joy in our giving, but it could also be the other things that we do, like seeing our impact in the world, seeing how change happens, feeling a part of the big mission of the church and of God's plan for us. So let's make certain that how we communicate about fundraising does those things. What has changed in recent years, and you've noticed this, I'm not telling you anything that isn't already going on in your church that you probably haven't figured out. We have fewer habitual givers than we used to. We have fewer people giving. And we're going to see some numbers in a little bit about how the Episcopal Church in the United States experienced this over the last year. But we have fewer habitual givers. There's way more economic anxiety. Even though the stock market keeps going up, so does inflation, so does unemployment, so does anxiety and fear in the media about what might come next. And so that work is really important for us to understand. There is anxiety in the system. We now expect a lot from online giving and online communicating. This is more than even in the pandemic when we relied on tools like Zoom and on online giving. It's just increased each year since then. So the more expectation our members have a lot of expectation on how we digitally understand uh, the behavior and how we are communicating with people about church, how they can make gifts back to church, and how they can communicate with each other. There's also a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of competition for our attention, and that comes out in lots of ways. So we want to make certain that the messages that we're sending aren't on the same wavelength as some of the fear that we're hearing, as some of the work that we're hearing, but in fact, we are understanding that our message is unique. We're talking about having impact in communities because God has called us to do this work. We are followers of Jesus into this work. We have a message that the rest of the world doesn't have about this. And that's what cuts through the noise, the anxiety, the attention that we're getting from all of our media. So let's make certain that we understand that in our communication styles. There's a lot of need for transparency in church, and that's because there's been a lot of broken trust across institutions in general. And I think that we need to really remember that that we have to over communicate, share data, tell people what the impact of their giving is, why we are asking for their money, how they can participate. Uh, let's make sure we all stay on mute so that we can have a quiet room. That way, when we need to hear something, we'll be able to do that. So as you come on, please mute yourself. That would be really helpful. And also, let's make certain that we understand that our folks have a real desire to act in the mission field, to do the work we're called to do. And our work, our job as leaders in church is to enable those ministries. Let's talk a little bit about the big picture. These are United States numbers, and they're talking about giving over time. And so please understand them as that. But let's take a look at what Giving USA 2025 said. We're about 1 month away from this year's list, which will have the 2025 numbers. So we're still looking at 2024 numbers here. I just want to point that out. Next month, Giving USA will release its new report and we'll have new updated numbers. But right now, we're looking at 2024. And what we can see is that in the last 40 years, giving to religion continues trending up. In fact, $143.6 billion last year, 2024, was given to religion or religious causes in the United States. Yet overall, our market share is shrinking. If you look at this graph and you see that tan bar that riding along the top, that represents religious giving or giving to religious institutions in the United States. That has decreased by more than 50% since 1983. 56% of the charitable dollar went to religion in 1983. Today, it's around 25%. That's that's an unsustainable trend. If that continues, that is a really scary number. And here's what else it tells us. It tells us that our nonprofit siblings have gotten a lot better at asking for money, at professionalizing their fundraising, at creating the kinds of plans that donors are responding to, and that they're being very successful at it. That's another thing that's changed since the 80s, that nonprofits, education, healthcare, the environment, arts organizations, they've all become much better at asking people to make gifts, and people are responding to them. So, religion, if we want to keep up at top here and keep in the highest realm of charitable giving, then we need to follow their lead and get much better at asking people. We can't just rely on people making gifts to the institution because they always have, because their grandparents did, because it was expected of them. We need to give them the reason why church is a place to invest your time, talent, and treasure in order to accomplish the work. Another thing that we witnessed, and this is the last of our Episcopal-centric numbers, in 2025, we saw the continuation of decrease in active membership, although it slowed. In 2025. I guess that's good news. We declined at a slower rate than we have been declining in the past. Yet we increased in Sunday attendance. This trend has been happening for a while, where we decrease active membership but increase visitors and members who are coming to church. Sorry, not members, visitors who are coming to church, people who are coming in but not affiliating. This is saying something maybe about our newcomer orientation or incorporation models, the work that Invite, Welcome, Connect calls us into. Maybe we need to get better at that integration work so that we can make certain that people are feeling included and wanting to align themselves with our churches. We see a decrease in the number of contributions and an increase in the amount being given. That's another tension to pay attention to. because that's where things get really unsustainable for us. Fewer people giving larger gifts is unsustainable. And those larger gifts are coming from a lot of our oldest members who have been members for a very long time, who, thanks to the stock market, have appreciated gifts and securities to share. But that is an unsustainable trend. Fewer people with larger giving can't continue forever, and we need to fill in those gifts and figure out either how to right size our budgets, which is a scary thought, or right size our giving to match the need. And that is about communicating the message and showing impact. So we're going to talk about some strategies for that. Anthony asks a really good question in the chat. How many other sectors requesting gifting outside religion have partnered with commercial entities? Um, you're right, that is happening in a lot of ways. Um, and while I don't want us to sell out, us as church to sell out in any way, it's not what I'm recommending. I do think that we need to look at diversifying our revenue in as many ways as we can. So that means what buildings and property might we need to start thinking about using or rededicating in a way so that they can draw people in who are able to then pay rent, rent off unused Sunday school rooms and convert them into offices or clinical spaces, things like that. What are some other revenues models that churches can use? We have a lot of property out there. We have a lot of ways that maybe we could reinvest or rethink about things. We don't have to become our own brand or start creating commercial products, but there are some ways that we can increase our revenue streams if we start to think a little bit more creatively. So I think that your point there is right. Um, I don't think we want to be in line with commercial entities, but we might want to adopt some of their thinking about creative ways to use what we already have and um, and do some work with that. So thank you for that. And I love the conversation that's happening in the chat. Thank you, typers, for being so active. So what we have happening when we have fewer donors making larger gifts is that it puts more pressure on our faithful givers. They feel like they can't let the side down. They feel that their gift really matters and perhaps are pushed into even more unsustainable levels because of that. And that makes people feel vulnerable. That makes people feel anxious. That does not make people feel loved and appreciated. So let's be really clear about what that looks like in pastoral lens when there are fewer people making larger gifts. It can make people feel like they're holding that pressure. If you know that you are one of the largest givers in your church, that might feel good, but it also is a vulnerability, and you might feel some anxiety about, can I keep that up? What happens if I don't? What happens when I can't do this? And that's a hard place for people to feel like they're carrying that burden. It also means that there's less of a broad ownership of the mission, right? And we never want that. We want everyone doing their work as has been given to them by God to do into the mission field. We're all called as we can to do the work that we've been given to do. But if we're feeling like some people are supporting the ministry and others aren't, then we have this sort of disparity. And that's not true. We don't operate in that economy in church. No matter what your gift size is, no matter how many hours you have to volunteer, you are giving, hopefully, prayerfully, at your highest level, at your best level. And we need, as church, to honor every kind of gift that people make and honor them in the ways. That is a pastoral approach to this anxiety we're seeing in the system right now. Our budget time, um, I've spoken with four treasurers in the last 2 weeks from churches that are already starting to worry about this year's budget going off the rails and starting to think about how next year's budget is going to be crafted. And it's May. They're already worried about this. They've only been 3 months, 4 months into this year's budget, and they're starting to see numbers that are freaking them out. And this gives us tremendous anxiety. How do we back off of that feeling of panic and help people understand what we can do about it? Well, the first thing I say to these treasurers is you've got to share this pain with your vestry or your finance committee so it's not sitting on your shoulders. Everybody has to know what's happening so they can start to think creatively on how to handle this. And then we can talk other strategies. But the first thing is unburden yourself. A lot of our treasurers hold, and this is just something to appreciate amongst our church in general. Our treasurers hold a lot of the tension of our church budgets with them. And they've been doing this work faithfully for years. And it's a unsung gift in many cases are your treasurers. Give them a little love. They're dealing with a lot, and help them out. Let's remember this year that every kind of gift that people make matters. Jesus, of course, tells us the story about the widow's mite, and that's a story that we really need to imagine, not just because of the gift size, but because of the honor that Jesus places on that person's faithfulness. Faith is what we're looking for. When I look at stewardship campaigns, hmm, and I look at the results that people share, they often talk about the total amount raised. They'll often talk about average gift size or some other kind of analytical data around the gift. They will often talk about the number of gifts that were made to get to that total. So they might say something like, we had 50 households give $200,000 and the average gift size was whatever it was, right? That's really great data. But what it doesn't say is how much participation did you have? I'd like to know that. I'd like to know that 100% of the people are doing something for the budget. And let's report and celebrate that as well. I'd also like us to be able to talk about how our volunteers are coming together and making the work happen in church and celebrate that and quantify if we can. How many hours do people spend working for the church for which they are not paid? Our volunteers do a tremendous amount of work for our church, not just in our external ministries and showing up on Saturdays to work the food pantry or the park cleanup or after school to do a tutoring program or on Wednesday nights to do a Bible study, but they're also sweeping up our churches and unclogging toilets and rearranging pews and arranging flowers and ironing vestments. Lots of things happen from our volunteers. And if we ever thought about tracking that in some way, we would be astounded that the average church has more than 1,000 volunteer hours a year. 1,000 volunteer hours a year from its members just to make church happen. That's incredible. And that's something to be celebrated and talked about in a stewardship campaign results. Let's honor the work that's really being done because however people are giving, they're saying, this mission is mine as well. I belong. I want to do something. Other strategies, we need to, if you don't have a way for people to give online, you're way behind the curve here. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying that to say you're leaving money on the table. Please make certain that there are ways for people to make a gift, a pledge online, And please find a way for visitors to make a gift with a QR code or a link or something when they come to visit your church. If they're not already a part of your pledging or your giving system, how does a visitor make a gift? If I were to come to your church, wherever you are, this Sunday, you would get very little from me if all I had to go on was the cash in my wallet. If you didn't have a way for me to make a gift from my phone, which I carry next to me all the time, you wouldn't get much because that's how I make my gifts. That's how I use my cash. I find that if I pull it out of a bank and have cash in my pocket, I spend it on stupid things. And so I've put all of that into digital ways. I'm not alone. Many people are doing this, not just our young people. I'm not young, I'm solidly Gen X. Um, Lots of people are doing this and living their lives like this now. And so let's make certain that we have a baseline for digital giving available in our churches. There are lots of ways to do this. And that's really, really something that's important for us to think about. This is pastoral work. Let's talk a little bit about the roller coaster of what 2026 fundraising is going to look like. We've established that people are still making gifts and they're still finding ways to share generously. We've established that trust is a currency that we cannot waste and that we need to invest in. Trust really matters. We've seen and we're hearing stories about how the few who are making large gifts are starting to feel that fatigue and how they are vulnerable then. If they leave or can no longer make their gift or their circumstances change, or if they pass away or they move out of town, uh, a big vulnerability is now opened up in our congregation's giving strategy. And that leaves us with some vulnerabilities. Let's make certain that we are aware of that and know that, because then we can begin planning for it and how to deal with it. We have to be talking about mission, and that's what we're going to move into in the next slides, how we communicate about mission and formation. So bad stewardship says we're short, please give. It uses language that's transactional. Give more, uh, the money is in your pockets. All those kinds of things we say that we think are well-intentioned and may in fact be true, but aren't motivational. But pastoral stewardship says God has entrusted you with a mission and God has entrusted God's world to you, to us. It's in our hands. And here is the honest cost of that. Here's what it costs to run our church. Here's what it's cost to do our outreach. Here's what goes into all of that. How can you discern your gift? How can you share your time, talent, and treasure with the church? In converse, what anxiety does to a campaign, it often makes us not want to talk about things until it bursts out in some awful way. So it hides financial realities until it's too late or until it bubbles out in some way that's unproductive. We tend to fixate on the budget and not on what the budget is funded. But we fixate on numbers and sliding things from line to line, trying to make sense of it. We don't talk enough about the mission. We pressure the same five biggest donors to keep it up, and that isn't good pastoral theology or stewardship theology. And what we do is we avoid direct invitation because now it's scary because we're bringing all of this stuff with us and we imagine that we're projecting that onto others. Instead, treat giving as a spiritual practice, not as an emergency response. When we treat giving as an ends and not the process, we're already starting to look at transaction and not transformation. That's messing us up. Instead, let's find the ways to tell the truth calmly. People deserve to know where the vulnerabilities in our budget are, where our liabilities are, where we're doing well, and do that often. Put that in a newsletter, put that in a mid-year report, put that with your pledge, your quarterly pledge statements if you do that. Write an article in the newsletter from the treasurer or write it with the treasurer and help them explain where we are in our budget and what's going on. Always connect the money to the mission, though, right? Money for its own sake is just money. But when it has a mission purpose, we're tying it to what we're doing and what we're called to do, it makes room for us to think of more creative ways to share our gifts. Pastoral leadership and stewardship thanks, teaches, and trusts. It thanks us all the time, every Sunday, every day, every newsletter, every email. We take time to thank people for their gifts and the way they share them, calling out some of them, thanking abundantly for everyone. It teaches us about the mission and our responsibility and our ability to do that work. God doesn't give us things we can't do. God gives us work we can do. So let's believe that and trust that. Instead of asking, how do we get people to give more? Instead of sitting around the stewardship meeting table saying, how can we increase our success? Let's ask instead, how do we help people understand, practice, and grow in their generosity? And then we pivot from fundraising pressure into stewardship formation. This year, as we look at some models together, I want us to take a look at what we've perhaps done in the past. We treat fundraising as a season of the year. We do it for a time-limited piece of our October or November. We might send a letter and hope for the best. We might have a Sunday where we gather all the gifts, right? You've done this before. You've seen this before. And this is very typical of our stewardship efforts. This year, we're going to ask you, and we're going to share some examples in a minute of how to develop real program around your stewardship formation so that you're doing some real teaching about the ministry of stewardship, about the ways we can share our gifts and tying it back to mission. We're going to teach and talk about storytelling, testimonials, prompts that help people think about why they give and what it means to them. We're going to teach gratitude practices so that people remember that that's where all of this starts. God created everything and gave it to us. We are grateful for that abundant gift, and that leads us into generosity as a response. That's our journey of generosity. And it all begins with that gratitude we have for having received every single thing that was created by God and handed to us. We're also going to give you some ways to reinforce all of this in our liturgy, because good Anglicans, we see it and then we do it. Our liturgy reflects how we believe and think and teach. And so we're going to give you some ways to incorporate that. People don't give because of the budget or even a well-crafted stewardship letter or our best efforts. They give because of the results. So let's show them how our children are formed, how we feed and care for our neighbors, how we are a house of prayer that matters and takes this seriously, how we sustain ourselves, we take care of each other and our neighbors, and how we create space for conversation, dialogue, healing, connection, relationship. When we allow scarcity to rule, it says you never have enough. You could always have more. Aren't you worried about what you don't have? But abundance says everything that was created, everything that is a noun in every noun was given to us by God, placed in our hands, in our hearts, to be transformed into things that God can use in the world to serve our neighbors and our people. The very same action, I probably going to commit some theological heresy, but I'm going to try it anyway. The very same action that happens at the table, where our gifts come up the aisle and are transformed, gathered, blessed, broken, and shared, transformed by the action of God at the altar, happens to us too when we then approach the altar and take of that meal and bring ourselves to that place. We are gathered, we are blessed, we are broken, we are shared with the world that needs us. And that is the action that moves us from scarcity to abundance. Every noun has been placed within you. You transform that in your heart and your spirit. You move it out into the world where it needs to go to serve God's people. We have some help for you this year at TENS. We're going to talk about tools for education, tools that start dialogue, uh, ways that we can do reflection and prayer throughout the year, and some help for your pastoral leadership. One of the ways that we do this is through our seasonal reflections. You can download these as a part of the annual stewardship campaign, which you can find on our website and you have access to as members of TENS. Every time the color changes in church, we have a seasonal reflection ready to go. You still have time to download the Pentecost reflection and get it ready to go out on Sunday. Slip it in your bulletin. It's a one pager. It talks about why we do this, what Pentecost gifts are, and reminds us that what we're going to see and read about in church has a stewardship lesson as well. And there's a little reflection question. Just hand this out. It's a way to keep people thinking about stewardship that doesn't say give, 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 but says pray, pray, pray. Reflect on this. Think about this. How is God acting in your life? You can use these for adult ed programs, your rector's forum, a Wednesday night Bible study. Take a look at these. They're there for you to create a non-anxious way and create a faithful response. We also have some liturgical tools available to you this year in our materials. Prayers of the people that you can use for your campaign or for your fundraising in general. We have some offertory sentences that aren't just the usual ones, some new ones you could try out that just kind of, when we change language and we shake things up a little, we remind people to pay attention in a different way. We've got some blessings over the plate and for our gifts, things that just kind of underscore what we're doing. What we pray shapes what we believe, and what we bless shapes what we give. Also new this year in the TENS materials are some adult ed resources. We have a whole 5-week curriculum that you can download and run as a weeknight Bible study or as an after Sunday small group. And they are scripture studies with dialogue questions that you can then use in small group to facilitate conversation to get things started. So download these. There's a leader and a participant guide. There are scripture readings, there are discussion questions. You can do this when you're doing your campaign or at any time before it or after it, just to kind of keep the conversation moving. Along with adult ed, we've got some family and youth and household formation exercises too. These are also prayer and scripture related with some little fun activities that you can do. It's a little curriculum. I shouldn't say little because it's powerful in its own way, to do these things around your kitchen table, to do these things on a Saturday afternoon with your kids, little ways to imagine our stewardship and our gifts, and discern as a family or as people in a small group at home how we might want to share our gifts with the world. What are the needs of the world? How do we identify them? So everyone gets a little chance this year to do some formation and some extra praying and reflecting. When we're doing that, we're not spending time in anxiety and panic. We're being reflective and prayerful and thinking about how we can share our gifts. Money belongs in a life of faith. This is really important for us to know that church has a role in helping people on their journey of generosity, and that money is a part of that. Jesus spent a lot of time talking about money. In fact, other than love, money is the most frequent topic of Jesus' ministry. 16 of the 40 parables, that's 40%, of Jesus' ministry was spent talking about money, stuff, things, or our attachments to them. That should give us pause to say, this is a big deal. In the first century or the 21st century and through the ages, money has a place in church when it's handled well, when it's handled pastorally. We're talking about it not in manipulative ways, not in transactional ways, but in pastoral, transformative ways. Everything that we do with our money, our spending of it, our saving, our investing, our giving, our earning, the jobs we have, the ways we take care of those who come after us, the ways we make gifts to our neighbors and our church, all of that is part of us and our whole spirit, our whole spiritual lives, holistic giving of time, talent, and treasure. This year, please do some storytelling. Stories make the mission come alive. When people see that you have a story and a point of view and a moment of conversion or a moment of power or a moment of time in which you can recall giving, sharing, or receiving gifts as having been really important to you, you inspire other people to think about those times that they've had in their lives. So do some storytelling this year, not just in your campaign, but throughout the year. Imagine doing one a month or putting something in your newsletter or your social media as well. We all carry around phones that make videos of us. You can do a 30-second video of why you give to your church, why it matters, and post it on your Facebook or your YouTube or your TikTok or wherever you post your social media in your church. Include some really simple prompts. Why did you pick this church of all the churches you could have come to? Why did you come the first Sunday and then come back the second and the third? What do your children learn in Sunday school? What do they talk about when they come home? Tell me a story of the time that the church was there for you when you needed it most, and there you found loving community. Also, tell the story of your ministry. I call these ministry impact reports. Um, if you have, we'll use the example of a food pantry. Talk about what happens there. How many people are fed? What kinds of food go into their boxes? Share a story if it's appropriate from someone who's received a box of food and have them ask them to tell the story of what that means for food security in their household. If you tell, excuse me, if you tell the story of our ministry, you show people that their gifts time, talent, and treasure are impacting real lives. They're doing the work of God. They're out there, and that is ministry. That's pastoral stewardship. That is leadership. That is leading people into understanding that their gifts have real meaning. It's not just a budget. It's not just a building. It's not just the things we see, but it's countless ways that we change lives through our giving. Help people know that, believe that, understand that. How can we use some of these new processes or practices? Maybe you don't want to throw out your whole campaign that you've done, but maybe just bring in a couple of new practices this year. Try them out, see how they go, get some feedback, then adapt and change again. We should always be changing our stewardship models, by the way. I know TENS puts out a similar one every year because it's the basic, but we also encourage you to off-road as much as you can, to change things up, to try on something new. Because if we just do the same thing year after year, what does they say about insanity and results, right? So like if we just do the same thing and expect the same results, we're not growing. We're not expecting things. So let's change it up. Maybe use those reflections as fruit for your sermon or ways that people can pray throughout the week. Maybe incorporate some of these liturgical practices throughout the year, and we give you some ways to do that. Think about think about some testimonies. Please try to think about that. Nothing is as powerful as somebody standing in front of the church and telling their story. And if you give them a prompt and you say, practice it and get it to 2 minutes or 1 minute, and give them a chance to do that rather than just point at them and expect them to do it, give them time to prepare, they can give something that's really beautiful that people pay attention to and remember. One of the things our nonprofit siblings have taught us really well is donor-centric fundraising, meeting people where they are and making the kinds of gifts that they want to make. Uh, Last year, I went to the symphony, and on my chair, as I pushed down my seat, was a pamphlet on all the ways I could make a gift to the symphony. You know, here's a website, here's a thing to think about. If you give this way, here's how to do it. If you prefer that, it's over there. I thought, here's the symphony doing this. This could be on the back pew of my church. This could be in the stack of materials in my church as well. So let's help people understand that it's not just pledge and plate and cash and checks. It's not just online gifts, but that they can make gifts through stocks and securities, through mobile giving, through their retirement assets, from countless other ways. And if there are things on this list that are new to you, and that you don't know how to accept, your diocesan CFO or treasurer, finance director probably knows how to accept these and can advise you. I could certainly walk through some of them with you as well, but let let people tell you how they want to make their gift rather than giving them only a couple of ways to do it. This will increase the ability for people to make meaningful gifts, and you meet them where they are. Don't force them into your way. Meet them where they are. A strong campaign this year should include really clear messaging. We're raising money for this, and this is why. This is how you can help, and this is what the need is. Boom. Say that for each of your ministry areas, and you have a really compelling way to talk about your message and your mission. Make it a relational invitation. You can share in so many ways. Volunteer, pray for each other. The gifts that you give each other by the genuinely kind things that you do are also part of your stewardship. If we actually understand that our stewardship is way beyond what goes into the plate, and is all of the ways that we minister to each other, we start to understand how this is discipleship, how this is about formation of our Christian values. Strong campaigns need multiple giving pathways and stories that back those up. They need to show impact. And you need to have a plan for how you're going to be grateful and recognize people for the gifts that they give. That's throughout the year, that's after they've made the gift, that's at the time of the budget, that's at the annual meeting, and a countless number of other times. You cannot say thank you enough. Nobody ever left church because they were thanked too many times. You cannot say, I am grateful for you enough in church. Please don't do these things this year. Please don't send one letter for your stewardship and hope for the best. Don't apologize for asking. Be bold. That isn't to say be obnoxious or not take cues when people say no or not right now or this is what I'd rather do. But it means you're asking not because you're lining your own pockets, but because you are doing the work of God in the mission field. You're asking for the church. Be bold. Stand in those steps. That is a beautiful thing that we are asking people to do. Don't just talk about the deficit without also talking about the ways we can address it, the things we can do, the hope we can have, the other things that go into it. If we just say all the time, we're operating a deficit, we're really panicked, we're not showing people any hope. Find the hope. We are people of hope. That is essential to our faith. We hang a whole lot of our lives and theology on Christian hope and expectation. So let's not abandon it in our budgets and in our stewardship practices. Just to reiterate, before we ask for other questions, tell stories this year and have them be missional, have them be clear, have them be beautiful, impactful. Invite every household to respond in a way that's appropriate to them through prayer, through sharing their wisdom, through making their gift, to volunteering. Round out your practices with real formation, book studies, curricula, preaching, teaching. Money comes up in so many gospels that you can talk about it often throughout the year without saying, and you need to give more, right? You can just talk about our relationship to money, the power of our giving, the things we can do. And then you won't get that person that says you always talk about money because you're not doing it with an ask. You're doing it with a pastoral invitation to think about it, to pray about it, to understand it. Whatever you do, start doing something. Do something different this year to respond to the fact that 2026 is a different year. We want people who can say, I belong to this place, that I'm a part of the mission and that mission matters to me. That what I do is not just me, but it's for God and God's work in the world. Generosity is only the one of the ways that I practice my faith, but it's one of the essential ways that I practice my faith. You can't do all the other things that faith requires of us and be stingy and hold back in your generosity. It's also required of us. So that person that says I'm not able to give, find the way that they can say yes to what they can give. That might not be a financial gift. That can be other things. Everyone has something that they can give to the church. And that's what churches need. This year, the goal is to not make people feel anxious so that they give, but to form people deeply enough so they can respond to the need. This is a very different kind of stewardship action. We want to make certain that that's what they get. Don't give because we told you you had to. Don't give because the budget says you should. Don't give even because you got a beautiful letter from the pastor asking you to do it. Instead, respond because you are called on a deep level from your bones, from the voice of God, from the scriptures, from the need of our community to respond in a way that includes our generosity. That's the work of this year's stewardship campaign. Keeping with that, this year's theme from TENS is called Plenty Good Room. And it reminds us that there is always more room at God's table in God's house, that the boundaries we put up, the walls that we build, the tables we build, and the chairs we put around them can always be expanded, and that there's always room for one more. This comes from a beautiful spiritual, a beautiful hymn that we sing in church sometimes, and it says that there is always plenty good room in God's kingdom. Find a seat and sit down. And I always invite people into this. Our resources are available to you in English and in Spanish. They are faithfully translated into Spanish with metaphor and not just word for word. Our translator is my upstairs neighbor. She's an amazing language teacher, and she does beautiful work. And we spend a lot of time talking about stewardship words and how to translate them faithfully. So this is a real gift. We hope that you take advantage of this and find ways to do the formation work, the teaching work, the reflective spiritual work, so that your campaigns can be strengthened. We're aiming for transformation, not transaction. Find the way this year to rise above the noise, not to panic, but to pastor instead. This year's password, and we'll include it in the materials that we send out also, is Matthew 22:4. And that there are no spaces in that. It's case sensitive. Matthew 22:4 will get you this year's download and every other year's download. You can also access 10 years of campaigns from TENS and take a look and see all the themes that we have out there. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and put us back into our big room so that we can have a conversation. I can answer any questions that you might have. I love that there are some great conversations going on in the chat. I haven't caught up with them all yet. If there's anything you want to bring out into the big room from that, now is a good chance to do that. If there are other things to chat about, I'd love to hear your questions. Remember to raise your hand so that I can call on you. And I would love to hear. What questions do you have about what we've talked about stewardship this year, about ways to incorporate pastoral work into your campaigns? Somebody's got to be first. Somebody's got to have a question. Raise your hand and I'll call on you. Someone asks what the hymn that our campaign is based on, Plenty Good Room, and that's the hymn. I'll send you all a link of somebody singing it beautifully. But it goes plenty good room, plenty good room, plenty good room in God's good kingdom. Plenty good room, plenty good room. Take a seat and sit down. And it goes on with many verses. It's beautiful. I'll send you a link with somebody who has a better voice than I. Thank you for those applause. But So you've gotten me to sing for you. Um, Now somebody needs to ask a question. Cynthia, I see your hand up. Come off mute.
Yes,
There you go.
yes. Would you talk a little bit more about um, having a way for people to donate online? Um, my congregation skews older. Um, many of us are not, most of us are not digital natives. Um, but even in a church like that, you believe that that's important. And would you talk a little bit more because you mentioned social media? Would you talk a little bit more about that in general?
Yeah, I would happy to do that. So first of all, I'm not a digital native either. I was born firmly in the 70s and we had a landline until we finally couldn't anymore. Uh, so we're also the last block to get cable TV, but that's a whole nother story. Um, it's important not just for our youngest donors, but coming out of the pandemic, research has shown us that 66% of people age 65 and over have used their phones and the internet to make a gift. So it's not just the young people, it's now coming into all generations. And I recently got my 82-year-old mother to use her phone to make a gift, which I thought was a pretty good thing to do. So that's just to say it's possible, and that we're using it more and people are becoming more familiar with it. The way I usually describe it is if you've bought something off Amazon, you're probably comfortable making a gift to your church, because it's a very similar process of sharing financial data and seeing how that screen works. So in church, what this looks like, and I've seen many different models of it. In my church, in the bulletin, right next to the offertory anthem, there's a big old QR code, one of those squares with the squiggly lines in it. And you use your phone camera, it opens up the donation page to the church. And so if you're a member or a visitor, you can use that to make your gift. I've seen churches have a little laminated card in their pew rack that people use to do that. And in some cases, that card, in fact, I was at a church 2 weeks ago. One side of the card was make your gift. The other side of the card had a QR code that went to fill out your visitor card. Like if you're brand new here, so you could do one card, two sides, two different forms to fill out. So it took both of those things. In some cases, I've seen churches also allow you to put that card in the plate when it comes by because we like that manual act of putting something in the plate. We're used to it. And it just is a way to say, hey, I've made my gift online, and I want it to be blessed and raised up as a gift as well. So those are a few ways that I'm seeing it done. Of course, your website also should have a giving page, and I will send out later on when I send everything else a link to an article that Tens wrote, has on our website about how to do a good giving page, the things to look for and the things not to do, and examples of different websites around the church that do it well. And so you can see a couple of examples of that. Social media, you know, a lot of people, and it's not also just not necessarily only young people, use Facebook and YouTube and Instagram to share pictures and moments with people. And you can create stories, you can create feeds, you can create other kinds of ways that people can share quick stories, or a picture and some text, a link to make a gift, or just to tell a story of generosity, and use social media for that. It's a great way to do it. If you have people who are willing to do that. If your church has an Instagram page and someone's willing to do a reel or a story, you can do that kind of work, and it's just as easy to do. If you don't know how to do it, ask a Gen Z or a Gen Alpha in your life to show you how to do that, and they will teach you more than you wanted to know about social media videos and how you might want to do that. I hope that answers your question. Kelly, thank you for finding that hymn in the African American Heritage Hymnal. I appreciate that. Um,
Thank you.
great. I see Margaret has her hand up.
Yes. Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. I'm a parish treasurer from Ottawa, Canada. We were discussing last night at Parish Council about our pledge drive, our annual event, and there wasn't very much enthusiasm for it. Seemed to work very well last year. There was some comments about that. And so they said, well, you're doing that seminar tomorrow, that webinar. Can you ask some questions? So I've taken from your talk that it to be included with testimony, and we've already started doing that, and it's been very, very successful. And also, just don't just send a pledge form and leave it. So, what can you mention about timing, or what can I build on to make this year a bit more successful,
Yeah,
please?
great. Thank you for that question. Again, when we think about doing our fundraising only at one time of the year and we forget that that leaves many other months untouched, um, and we only talk about money when it's time to ask for it, we've missed out on all these opportunities to kindly, gently, easily, pastorally talk about how we share our gifts. And we tie it just to the transaction. So you're starting with some stories and testimonies. Do them now, do them throughout the summer. Have a regular spot in your newsletter once a month where somebody's sharing their story. I guarantee if you put out the call and say, we'd like 10 people this year to write up 2 paragraphs, they'll tell you more,
Mhm.
on a time the church was here for you and it really mattered to you, you'll get some beautiful stuff. And you can put those in your newsletters. You can ask people to talk about them if they're willing to stand up and tell that story to people. That's a great thing. All of these things, again, they bring our own personal testimony and put it out there so that other people can pick it up and be inspired by it. That's what we want, is for people to be inspired. That's one thing I would suggest doing. I think another is to get ahead of any kind of budget anxiety that's out there by being really transparent about where things are at, where our money is, what our needs are, not in our deficit, but just people don't want to be surprised.
Mhm.
When we surprise them either with, we're asking you for money, or there's a big problem we haven't talked about all year, and here it is, then we start to lose some trust. People are like, why did you save this to the end? So if there's something out there, get ahead of it and present solutions if you have them, or present an open forum for people to help you. You know, one of the things that vestries or parish councils often do is try to solve the problem on their own before it gets, they don't want people to panic, or they don't want to get it, but if they asked, how do we solve this problem? People will use their corporate minds, their teaching minds, their life experience to help you solve things in church, right? We are people who live lives.
Yes. Yes.
And so if we ask for what we need, that's another great way to do it. And something that I would suggest that we incorporate now and get good at. Thanks for your question and thanks for getting started early. Go back
Thank
to your committee and say you learned some things and bring more questions next time.
thank you very much.
Thank you. What are some other questions that are out there? Hi, Joe. I see your hand up.
Time was on purpose,
Hey,
which always excites me.
this time, well, you learned how to do it and now you're exercising it.
um, the thanks end. I've never been a part of a church where we thanked an individual for what they gave. In our churches, it's extremely private. I would be thing, but so we tend to thank everybody, which probably makes the thanking not nearly as focused as it should be. So this may be a Canadian thing. Many things we think are private. Money is one of them. And so, but is there a way you can thank people as individuals without saying, thanks for the bucks you gave us? I ask that respectfully.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Joe. I think that's a great question. And so first, I would say you don't have to mention the number in order to be grateful for it, right? You don't have to say thank you for your $100 or your $1,000 or your whatever. You can say thank you for your gift. That really meant a lot. That was really meaningful. Thank you. And we can assume that everyone is making some kind of gift. So if you're called out, that's a great thing. You made a gift. Thank you. You responded. Um, that's thing one. Thing two about money is the more we normalize the conversation about money, the less taboo it becomes. When we say it's okay to talk about money in church, it's not okay to be manipulative. It's not okay to try to sell things. It's not okay to shame people, but it is okay if money comes up in conversation or an example or as a struggle that we have. We don't tell our money trauma stories. You notice how many people will tell you about their addictions, but they won't tell you about their scary money problems. They'll tell you about all kinds of other things, but we hold on to money so tightly because it's not normalized. We think that's a particular source of shame. And maybe it's because our success shaped society tells us that your bank balance is who you are. But church says that's not our economy. We are whole people with real lives. And so being those people in the world, let's normalize those conversations. That doesn't mean we want everybody airing their laundry or their stuff all the time, but let's also understand that almost everybody has a trauma about money in some way. Something that happened in their childhood, something that happened in their adult life, that time they were laid off or that came up short or had to juggle the money around to pay the bills. Unless you've lived just a deeply privileged life, you've had some trauma associated with money. And that's something we share. If we acknowledge that, then when we say things like, thank you for your gift, it's not embarrassing. It's standing in the strength of that statement. So it's all about how we talk about money. If we're not manipulative, if we're not shame bearing, if we're not trying to name or call someone out, but we are celebrating and encouraging and supporting, that's really important. And this goes doubly to those clergy friends of mine who say they don't want to know what their people give because they are worried about how that would change their relationships. And I'm like, I say to those same people, you hear their confessions, and then you still look them in the eye and have dinner with them, right? I mean, like we can talk about money too and know what people are doing without it having to be open, right? Your whole church shouldn't know what everybody gives, but the people who are pastorally responsible for folks should know because money is part of our pastoral trauma. Those are a couple of ideas that I have, Joe, but you can't say
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just realized when I've heard this conversation before, I'm a grandfather now with grandchildren. I remember hearing that about parents, how many parents will talk about sex, drugs, rock and roll, but money is the one that, many kids grow up not having any idea how much money their parents made, not even in the ballpark.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe, for naming that. Anne, you've got your hand up and had for a while. Thank you for your patience.
I just wanted to pass on some of our experience with e-transfer. It was a little challenging to get it set up because we're a two signature for any deposits or checks. So we had to change that for e-transfer. It's working like a top. We have people use it for a $2 cup of coffee at our craft fair. It's used extensively at any of our fundraisers because people come in and say, "Oh, I didn't bring any money." So it's been really, really successful there. A lot of people don't have checks anymore. So we've got a lot of people making monthly donations to the parish through e-transfer. It's worked out well.
I'm so glad, Anne, that you've had a good experience of setting up e-transfer and making that work because I think it just unlocks possibilities for people who wouldn't otherwise have them. I remember the days when checks were cheap to order from your bank, and I wrote a lot of them. And now I'm stingy with checks. Like I write a very few checks because I don't want to order more. I've had the same block of checks for a very long time, and I'm no longer willing to just write checks willy-nilly. It has to be something really specific that there's no other way to do it. So that's normal. And Gen Z, what's a checkbook? So if we want to
We're
prepare,
talking 80-year-olds. We have no problem with the 80-year-olds plus doing e-transfer. It's
yeah,
great.
absolutely. Again, if you've used Amazon to buy something or made an online purchase, you probably are okay with using e-transfer. And so, Anne, thank you for setting it up. I know when you got systems in place, which are good systems to have two signatures, it takes a little longer, but worth the effort. Robert, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. We use e-transfer at Air Parish as well. Um, there's we do a few fundraisers outside of the church that raise some money. One is a fun script uh, gift cards, and we raise probably in the range of $2,000 a year in income for our capital fund just by selling fun script cards through the year. Uh, and a lot of that is done by e-transfer. So people get their cards every month, and rather than write a check, they'll do an e-transfer to the account,
Yep.
and it works wonderfully.
Recurring or automated giving in general is a great way that all online giving can make things really normalized and easy for people, whether that's a bank check or an e-transfer. I've actually experienced in stewardship campaigns where I'm waiting for somebody to fill in a pledge form that gave last year. They're like, I do recurring giving. I don't need to fill out any more pledge paperwork, do I? Because that's coming every month. Whether, so it's like these systems are in place to make it really easy to automate this, to have it recurring, to be set up with when money comes in your account, to pay bills and to make your charitable gifts as well. So thank you, Robert. I'm glad that you're using it and that it's going well for you. There are lots of ways to do it that don't have any transaction costs too, like direct ACH payments from your bank, or bill using your bank's bill pay. system, actually cuts a paper check to your church, but you don't have to write the check. Things like that are good ways that don't incur any transaction costs. And that's better for both sides as well. So lots of good ways to use that tricky technology. This is a great conversation. Anything else about either technology or transformative giving or how we do formation and money talk in our congregations? Robert,
Yeah, again, um, you don't always have to be thanking people for the money. A lot of times, if you thank people for the effort and the work that they do in the church, we have a lot of people in the church that put an enormous amount of time into the service time, running different programs, doing fundraising, and just giving a general thank you to them in public during a service is a great way to show appreciation.
yeah, thanking for all the things that we give is really important. Not just our funds, but everything is an opportunity to say thanks. Did you like the choir anthem today? Those were your gifts at work. Did you like the flowers on the altar? Those were gifts that people gave and made, and time that was spent. Did you have fun on Saturday getting together to clean the church? Yes, you did have fun. It was a great experience. Thank you. So we can everything is an opportunity to thank people. And
We've
oh, go
found
ahead.
with the par givings, there's a super relationship with the person in charge of it with the Diocese of Nova Scotia. People they say, I want to increase my offering through the par giving. And what we do is we ask them to send the treasurer an email with the increase amount. And then we send that on to the diocese, the person responsible for it, and copy the original sender. So it's a simple email. They've got a paper trail and it's done immediately. It works really well.
Yeah, online giving has those autoresponder features that you can set up, and you need to pay attention to them because if you don't, weird things go out that you didn't plan on. So take the time. But what goes out then is, an email to you, to the treasurer, to the person who made the gift, so everyone is informed. But then also you can say, thank you for your gift, and here are other ways to get involved. You can put other information and links back to your website or to how to sign up to be a volunteer or things like that. Whenever you're doing those kinds of autoresponders, consider the you're not upselling like you would in retail, but offering additional opportunities for connection in church is one of those things that autoresponders are good for as well. So think about that. Thanks, Anne. Good stuff. I see a conversation happening that I just want to flag in the chat about giving directly from retirement assets, and especially in the US. There are super tax advantages to having people give their required minimum distribution or a qualified charitable distribution directly from retirement assets, going to the church. Your church should know how to accept those. If your treasurer doesn't, then contact your diocesan CFO and say, how do we make sure if somebody wants to give an RMD or a QDC that we know what to do with that? Because there's a tremendous tax advantage to doing that, and it can increase people who are living on retirement assets, increase their ability to share very generously. So make sure to take advantage of that. Any other questions? We're at our time, but I'll hang out for a little longer with you all if you want me to. If you have another question. Well, I think I'm hearing quiet. I've also really appreciated the chat. And so I'm going to include that in the materials that I send out because you all have been sharing great information with each other. So expect that along with an email from me with resources, a video to this, slide deck, and all kinds of other things. Dwight, thank you again on behalf of the Diocese of the Central Gulf Coast for inviting us, and to our Nova Scotia neighbors who showed up in big numbers this year or this evening. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Yeah, this is great. We thank you all. This webinar was sponsored by Diocese Central Gulf Coast, which is the Florida Panhandle in southern Alabama. And I love seeing all our brothers and sisters up north that have the same questions and the same concerns that we do down in our neck of the woods. So thank you all for coming and being so engaging.
Thanks, friends. We'll see you again soon, and you'll hear from me even sooner. Bye, friends. Have a good night.